Hey guys, welcome back to GX Story Sleeping. Tonight we sail north, way north, to the shadowy, frostbitten fjords and smoky mead halls of Viking Age Scandinavia, where warriors howl like wolves, ships slice through glacial waters, and, you'll never believe this, people are scrubbing behind their ears. You've seen the Hollywood versions, right? Leather, grime, blood. But, surprise, the real Vikings, they were kind of neat freaks. Picture it. You're squinting into a swirling blizzard, expecting to find some filthy raiders gnawing on elk bones. Instead, you catch a whiff of lavender. Someone's rinsing their armpits with melted snow water and brushing their hair with what looks suspiciously like a fancy comb. Sure, these are people who could, and did, cleave a helmet in two. But also, they bathed. They trimmed their beards. They wore linen underpants for crying out loud. You probably won't survive the battle, but at least you'll die clean-shaven. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, hey, drop your location and what time it is where you're watching. I love seeing where you all tune in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the creaking edge of a dragon-proud longship, waves slapping against the hull as seabirds shriek overhead. The salty wind tangles your hair, but next to you, a broad-shouldered Viking calmly untangles his braid with what appears to be a bone comb. He flicks a bit of seaweed from his beard and grins, flashing surprisingly white teeth. Welcome to the world of the unironically hygienic Viking. Here's the thing no one ever told you in school. Cleanliness was part of Viking daily life. It wasn't just a convenience, it was cultural. Weekly baths were common, and Saturday was lagardar, literally washing day. Viking settlements, even the temporary camps in foreign lands, often had access to fresh water, and they made sure to use it. Dirt under the fingernails? Unacceptable. Greasy hair? No thanks. Modern historians scratched their heads for years, trying to reconcile this with the brutal image of bloodthirsty raiders. But here's a fringe tidbit for your dreams tonight. Some Norse folks may have even carried travel-sized grooming kits, like tweezers, razors, and little ear spoons, attached to their belts. Imagine, you are storming a monastery and thinking, wait, is my beard even today? That's the Viking vibe. One fact that's not up for debate, those bone combs, they're everywhere. Archaeologists find them all across Viking Age Europe, Finland to Ireland. Some are finely carved with inlaid designs and show signs of regular, even obsessive use. You don't make that many combs unless a lot of people care about keeping those glorious locks in check. But why? Why the obsession with being clean in an age of mud, blood, and plague? Theories swirl. Some scholars argue it was about status, showing you weren't just some wild peasant, but a civilized warrior with standards. Others think it was for health. Lice were the enemy, and grooming helped fight them off. And there's always the social angle. Clean people attract more admiration, or, more dates, especially if you're trying to steal a Saxon maiden or two. And here's where it gets funny. English monks, those poor guys constantly getting raided, actually complained in their writings that Viking men were too clean, and that their frequent grooming and bathing gave them an unfair advantage with the local ladies. Yes, that's a real grievance recorded in historical texts. Too clean. Imagine being so threatening that your shampooing habits are an international scandal. So now, as your ship glides into a misty Scandinavian harbor, just remember, you're stepping into a world where battle axes swing, but so do clean linen tunics, where you might see a warrior polishing his helmet with the same intensity he gives to flossing, where the fearsome Norseman double-checks his beard symmetry before invading your village. You walk ashore, past reed-roofed longhouses and drying racks of fish, and inhale a sharp, fresh scent, maybe pine, maybe birch. A woman washes a woolen cloak in a trough. A boy scrapes mud off his boots with a carved wooden stick. And someone, somewhere, is probably plucking their nose hairs with a bronze tweezer. You duck under the low doorway of a longhouse, blinking as your eyes adjust to the dim interior. The smoke from the central hearth curls lazily toward a vent in the roof, mixing with a gentle aroma of herbs, maybe thyme or juniper. Definitely something cleaner than you'd expect from a room where people eat, sleep, and exist together through long, icy winters. And right there, by the back wall, is something that makes you pause. A wooden bucket, not sloshing with ale or full of fish, but pristine, sitting on a low bench next to what looks like a rag made from worn linen. Congratulations, you've just found the Viking bathroom. Well, their version of it. Now, we're not talking about white porcelain or heated floors here. Viking hygiene was impressively advanced for the time, not modern luxury spa level. But even without plumbing or hand soap, these folks put together a functional system for staying clean. That bucket, likely used for washing, maybe filled with warmed water in the mornings or even snow melted down in winter. The linen, think of it as the medieval Norse washcloth, used to wipe hands, faces, and anything else in need of a refresh. If you're picturing everyone just squatting in the woods, think again. Latrine pits and designated waste areas were actually part of Viking settlements. In some places, they even dug channels to carry waste away from living quarters. Primitive plumbing, sure, but still a massive leap ahead of the toss it out the window approach favored in some later medieval cities. Take that 14th century Paris. You crouch down next to the bucket and pick up a small object nearby. It's smooth and dark, and you realize it's a shard of soapstone. Vikings used this, sometimes even with animal fat and ash, to make a basic form of soap. It doesn't smell like mango and sea salt, but hey, it gets the job done. And there's another thing you wouldn't expect. Some archaeological finds suggest that Viking homes had partitions for privacy. Not full-on bathroom stalls, but nooks where one could tend to more personal tasks without being on full display. Not exactly spa day at the Ritz, but not barbaric either. The mainstream historical fact here? Viking Age homes, particularly those of wealthier individuals or families, included deliberate hygiene areas, places for washing up, cleaning clothes, and even combing out hair. We know this from excavations in sites like Hedeby and Ribe, where wash basins and drainable floor sections hint at surprisingly thoughtful domestic design. And then there's the quirky fringe detail. Some researchers believe Vikings may have used moss as a kind of natural toilet paper, soft, absorbent, and compostable. So if you ever find yourself in a Scandinavian forest without Charmin, nature has your back, literally. Now there's still scholarly debate around exactly how frequently these domestic bathrooms were used. Some argue they were more symbolic than functional, or maybe only used during certain parts of the year. Others think personal hygiene was part of a broader routine, woven into daily chores like cooking or weaving. After all, if you're scrubbing your laundry by hand, it's not much extra effort to wash your armpits while you're at it. As you sit cross-legged on a woven mat and watch someone carefully pour warm water into a wooden basin, it's hard not to appreciate the practicality of it all. No waste, no fuss, just simple tools used with care. Someone dips their fingers in, then wipes down their neck with a practiced motion. Across the room, a child scrapes something from under their fingernails with a bone pick. It's all so calm, so normal, so clean. And outside, snow begins to fall again, frosting the sloped rooftops and filling the air with that soft, damp hush that only winter can bring. Inside, there's warmth, water, and a quiet pride in staying just a little bit fresher than the world expects. You step back outside, the cold air nipping at your cheeks, and your fingers brush against something hanging from your belt. It jingles faintly, a small cluster of odd tools, each one worn smooth with use. A narrow bronze pick, a pair of tweezers, a curved blade with a bone handle, not weapons, not charms, grooming tools, your very own Viking hygiene kit. And believe it or not, you're not special. Nearly every man, woman, and probably even some well-groomed goats carried these little tool sets. Archaeologists find them constantly in graves, settlements, and even trading hubs. They weren't luxury items reserved for nobles or warriors. They were everyday essentials, like a pocket knife or, more accurately, a modern-day dop kit dangling from your belt. You pull one item free and squint at it. It's a razor, not a sleek steel one from a drugstore, but a sturdy, half-moon-shaped blade used to trim beards or shave stray hairs. Another tool is an ear spoon, delicate, spoon-shaped, perfect for scraping out wax or, who knows, a few rogue fleas. And yes, you might now be the only person in the room who's thinking about Viking earwax. You're welcome. The mainstream historical fact here is as solid as a Norse oak ship. Personal grooming kits were part of daily life for many Vikings, especially men. The presence of razors, tweezers, nail cleaners, and combs in both burial sites and homes tells us grooming wasn't a luxury. It was the baseline. You get dressed, you eat, you trim your beard. That's just how things worked. Even warriors took their kits along on campaigns. You're headed to sack a town? You better bring your axe, your shield, and your tweezers. Priorities. The strange little fringe detail? Some kits were incredibly ornate, carved with animal motifs, gods, or interwoven knotwork. It wasn't just about function. These things were meant to be seen, admired, maybe even envied. One set found in Gotland was made of silver and bone, clearly belonging to someone who wanted people to notice he cared about eyebrow symmetry. That's next-level confidence. Now, scholars love to argue about whether these items were purely personal or had a more communal element. Could there have been a local groomer, someone who offered beard trimming services or dental cleaning like a pop-up Viking barber? There's no hard evidence yet, but the sheer number of tools suggests there was more to Viking grooming culture than just solitary self-care. Maybe a traveling trader doubled as a cuticle expert. Maybe not. Either way, you now understand how personal hygiene was woven into identity. A messy appearance could be interpreted as laziness, or worse, weakness. If you're trying to impress your chieftain, your potential spouse, or the goddess Freya herself, you better look like you know what a tweezer is. As you walk through a bustling village square, you pass someone bent over a reflecting pool, checking their hairline with the help of morning sunlight. A woman adjusts the angle of her braided bun, slipping in a pin carved from antler. Nearby, a boy fusses with a loose thread on his tunic, scowling as he snips it away with a tiny knife. There's a rhythm to the place, a quiet undercurrent of upkeep and attention to detail. Clean fingernails, oiled beards, lint-free cloaks. It's not vanity, it's survival. In a culture where reputation means everything, even a fleck of dirt can send the wrong message. You catch your reflection in the polished metal of a helmet and realize your beard's a bit lopsided. Luckily, your belt has just the tool for that. Steam rises in lazy curls from the edge of a rocky pool, tucked between the snow-dusted pines of a Norwegian hillside. You dip a toe in, then your whole foot. The water is deliciously warm, not scalding like a Roman bath, but soothing, like melted snow kissed by sunlight. Across the pool, a burly man with braided hair, and not one but two rings in his beard, leans back with a satisfied sigh. He nods at you. Welcome to Viking bath time. And no, this isn't a once-in-a-lifetime luxury. This, believe it or not, is routine. You expected mud and body odor, maybe a helmet full of sweat, but the truth is, Vikings made time to bathe frequently, especially on Saturdays. They called it lagardager, meaning washing day. And it wasn't just a suggestion, it was tradition. Wash your body, clean your clothes, scrape the grit from your fingernails, and for Odin's sake, rinse your hair. The mainstream historical fact here is oddly refreshing. Vikings bathed more than many of their medieval neighbors. The English, for instance, often viewed bathing as suspicious or sinful, because nothing says holiness like filth. But Norse culture saw cleanliness not only as pleasant, but respectable. In fact, if you showed up to a feast smelling like a wet bear, you might find your seating arrangements downgraded. And guess what? They didn't always have to trek out to a hot spring like this. Bathing was often done in wooden tubs within the home, or near a hearth. Families would take turns, heating water over the fire and pouring it into the tub. Yes, sometimes multiple people bathed in the same water. But in an age where disease and body lice were real threats, this was still a win. And here's your quirky fringe tidbit. There are a few sagas, epic Norse tales passed down through generations, that mention bathhouses. One even describes a character being ambushed in a stofa, a kind of steamy bathing hut. Imagine being attacked while exfoliating. Talk about a rude interruption to self-care. There's scholarly debate about how common these bathhouses were. Some argue they were limited to wealthier homes or communal village centers. Others believe they were more widespread, especially in Iceland, where geothermal springs made hot water practically spill out of the ground. Whatever the case, the intent was clear. Wash regularly, and not just for function, for pride. You dip your shoulders under the water and feel the heat soak through your skin. Someone nearby pours water from a carved wooden ladle over his head, scrubbing his scalp with what looks like crushed herbs mixed with animal fat. An early shampoo, of sorts. The smell is earthy, maybe minty. It's not herbal essences, but it works. There's even some evidence that Vikings may have scented their bathwater with pine needles or birch leaves, both for the smell and the mild antiseptic qualities. Whether it's for hygiene or just to feel fancy, you have to admire the effort. Back on shore, another man dries off with a woolen cloth, then oils his skin with a mixture of rendered fat and what smells faintly like beeswax. Your modern brain might recoil at the idea, but hey, moisture's moisture, and winter in Scandinavia is not gentle. Then there's the hair. Viking men and women alike took hair seriously. You watch as one woman wrings hers out, braids it tightly, and dabs something fragrant behind her ears. Cedar, maybe. Or wild thyme. Whatever it is, she smells better than 80% of gym locker rooms in the 21st century. You're beginning to see the bigger picture. These people didn't clean up out of vanity. It was ritual, routine, survival. Warm water wasn't just for the body, it was for the soul. A moment of calm in a life that often meant sailing into foreign lands and swinging sharp things at strangers. You lean back against a warm rock, the steam soft against your face, and let your eyes drift half closed. A raven calls in the distance, and the scent of wood smoke mingles with pine. Congratulations, you're cleaner than a 10th century noble. A low wind whistles across the edge of the fjord as you tighten the belt on your freshly laundered tunic, still warm from drying by the hearth. Your feet crunch over snow-dusted gravel as you approach a gathering at the village center, market day. Cloaks billow, voices rise and fall, and the smell of baked bread and smoked fish curls into the air like an invitation. And yet, amid the clang of trade and the shuffle of boots, something curious stands out. Everyone looks sharp. Braids are neat. Faces are clean-shaven or proudly groomed. Even the dogs look brushed. You start to wonder if you're in a fashion show rather than a trading hub. But here's the quiet truth humming beneath it all. Appearance mattered. In Viking society, looking presentable wasn't about vanity. It was about honor, respect, and, let's be real, a little social maneuvering. The mainstream historical fact here is simple but profound. Viking laws, actual laws, reference cleanliness. In some regions, especially Iceland, texts like the Graga's legal code mention grooming in connection to honor and shame. Show up to a formal gathering looking like you just rolled out of a haystack, and your words might carry less weight. Appear polished and put together, you might just land that trade deal or marriage proposal. This wasn't a world of anonymous crowds. Reputation followed you like a shadow. People remembered how you looked, how you smelled, how you carried yourself at the last thing. The Viking legal assembly where decisions were made and grievances aired. If you looked unkempt, it could suggest laziness, madness, or even bad luck. And now, for the delightful fringe tidbit, some Norse people may have used lye made from ashes and water to bleach their hair lighter. That's right, Vikings going blonde on purpose. It wasn't just genetics, it was a choice, a style. Some historians speculate that blonde hair carried connotations of beauty or prestige, and people went to great lengths, literally chemical lengths, to achieve it. Of course, there's still scholarly debate over just how common this practice was. Were only the elite dousing their locks in homemade bleach? Or was this the Viking version of a teenage hair phase? The evidence is inconclusive, but what's clear is that altering appearance and enhancing it wasn't taboo. It was strategy. You pass a young man at a stall who's adjusting the fall of his fur cloak with great care, clearly trying to appear taller, broader, more intimidating. His beard is oiled into sharp points at the end, and he's definitely wearing eyeliner, or rather, kohl, the dark eye pigment borrowed from Eastern trade routes. It's practical, sure, reduces sun glare, but also makes him look like he just walked off the set of a Norse-themed boy band. You can't help but chuckle softly. You've spent your life imagining Vikings as snarling mud goblins, but here's one adjusting his cheekbone angles. This world isn't about brutal survival. It's about presence. Looking good meant being taken seriously, whether in court, at sea, or over a drinking horn. Personal grooming wasn't a footnote. It was a weapon. The sound of laughter bubbles up nearby. Two women are comparing brooches, but they're also clearly clocking each other's hairstyles. One sports a crown braid so intricate it could support a small bird's nest. The other has a silk ribbon laced through hers, bright red against raven black hair. You notice again, even among peasants and traders, there's pride in appearance. And as you glance into a polished bronze bowl at a merchant's stall, catching your reflection, windswept hair, slightly uneven beard, you wonder if maybe you should have brought that silver comb after all. You're crouched by a quiet stream just outside the village, the kind that weaves past mossy rocks and under leaning birch trees. The sun catches on the surface, flickering like tiny runes across the ripples. In your hands, you're holding a small carved comb. It's not decorative, though it is beautifully made. It's functional, and it's not made of wood, but bone. Vikings had a thing for combs. In fact, if you were buried as a Viking, there's a shockingly high chance you'd be sent to the afterlife with your comb in tow. That's how serious they were about hair care. From simple peasant graves to lavish ship burials, combs show up again and again, sometimes worn down by years of use, sometimes placed lovingly in a pouch or under the skull, like a final grooming just before entering Valhalla. The mainstream historical fact is this: Viking combs, most commonly carved from bone or antler, were a near universal possession. Thousands have been recovered in archaeological digs across Scandinavia, Britain, Ireland, and beyond. These weren't throwaway items. They were carefully carved, often decorated with geometric patterns or animal heads, and designed with interlocking teeth to handle even the most tangled of war braids. They didn't just toss their hair around and call it a day. Combing was part of the routine, part of being a Viking. You could probably skip breakfast, but you couldn't skip detangling. And not just hair. These combs likely doubled as lice removers. That's your quirky tidbit for this section. Some combs had teeth so fine they could pass for early knit combs, and many combs were found broken, possibly from repeated use against stubborn infestations, which tells you two things. One, yes, lice were a problem. And two, people actually dealt with it. Sure, the idea of scraping bugs out of your hair with a cowbone comb might not scream relaxing spa ritual to you, but imagine the relief of having clean, itch-free hair in a time when soap was homemade and medical care involved fermented honey. It wasn't glamorous. It was necessity. There's still an open scholarly debate about whether combs were ever used communally. Did families share one comb? Did chieftains have their own gold-plated deluxe versions? Was there a kind of Norse etiquette around grooming tools? We're not sure. But considering the personal nature of their burial placement, many historians lean toward the idea that these combs were seen as intimate objects. Like a toothbrush today, but one you might proudly wear on your belt. As you tug the comb through your hair, you notice how it catches in one or two spots. Not surprising. Viking hairstyles could be elaborate. Tightly braided crowns, half-shaved scalps, or long manes carefully oiled and plaited. It wasn't all rugged windblown glory. It was curated chaos. You remember hearing that the English chroniclers used to complain. Yes, complain. About how attractive Viking men were. The women of Anglo-Saxon towns apparently swooned over their clean hair, styled beards, and fancy clothes. So not only did Vikings raid monasteries, they also raided hearts. Smooth move, Eric. Back in the village, someone's sharpening a knife, while a child plucks fleas from the family dog's fur with a miniature comb. It's a subtle, rhythmic ritual. Comb, pause, flick. Comb, pause, flick. And just like that, you understand. Grooming isn't just a hygiene task. It's part of the rhythm of the day. Something done quietly, habitually, maybe even socially. A moment of calm between storms. So as the breeze picks up and your fingers glide once more through your freshly combed hair, you realize you're not just keeping tidy. You're taking part in something ancient, something almost sacred. The belief that looking after your body, starting with your hair, is a form of strength. And if that comb breaks, don't worry. There's a guy in the market who carves new ones. Custom-toothed, if you ask nicely. You step into a small longhouse tucked between two fjords, the kind with a thick thatch roof and walls that groan a little in the wind. Inside is dim but warm. A fire crackles in the center, and a low bench circles the room where villagers gather, and some mending leather, others gently arguing about whose goat keeps wandering off. And just past them, sitting cross-legged near the hearth, is an older woman gently mixing something in a shallow bowl. She's the local healer, or maybe just the one who knows how not to poison you. And what she's mixing? Soap. Well, soapish. The mainstream historical fact here is simple, if not particularly bubbly. Vikings made their own cleaning agents using lye. essentially a caustic substance created by filtering water through hardwood ashes. Combine that with animal fats and heat, and voila, you have a rudimentary soap. Not exactly peach scented, but surprisingly effective at cutting grease, scrubbing skin, and making sure you don't smell like you slept in a dead whale. And here's where things get slightly wild. This same lye-based mixture wasn't just for washing hands or your best wool cloak. Some Vikings used it on their hair and even on their beards. That's right, early hair products, courtesy of chemistry and goat drippings. But this brings us to your quirky fringe tidbit. There's speculation that some of this soap was so high in pH, so alkaline, that it could actually lighten hair over time. So, if you've ever wondered whether that platinum blonde raider across the fjord is a natural or not, now you know. He might be bleaching his beard in homemade Viking Clorox. Now, here's where scholars raise their quizzical brows. Some argue that hair lightening wasn't intentional at all. Maybe it was just a side effect of staying clean. Others suggest it was deliberate, a Norse fashion choice, maybe to emulate gods like Balder or to stand out in the social arena. The evidence is murky, tangled like a salt-drenched braid, and we may never fully know whether the light hair was trend or accident. Still, the act of making and using lye soap reveals a lot. It required time, effort, and the kind of knowledge passed down in quiet corners of smoky rooms. You watch the woman by the fire carefully ladle the mixture into small clay pots, and you realize this isn't just chemistry. It's craftsmanship. It's love, in a gritty, nose-burning kind of way. Nearby, a boy scampers in from the cold, cheeks flushed, arms filthy up to the elbows, with gods know what. His mother tuts softly, scoops a bit of the soap mixture, and rubs it briskly between his hands with snowmelt water. It stings a little, judging by the squeal, but when he emerges with clean fingers and a slightly frazzled expression, everyone chuckles. And that's the thing. Viking cleanliness wasn't sterile. It wasn't clinical. It was rough, homemade, and often smelled like smoke and sheep. But it was theirs. A daily ritual, a cultural cornerstone. Soap wasn't something they bought. It was something they brewed. In one corner of the longhouse, a bundle of herbs hangs drying. Sage, yarrow, juniper. Some of these may have been mixed into soaps or washing waters for fragrance, or maybe for their antibacterial properties, though Vikings wouldn't have called them that. They just knew certain things kept the skin from going spotty and unpleasant. Trial, error, and the occasional rash, probably. You reach over to the warm pot of lye soap and dip a finger in. It's gritty, smells faintly of pine tar and ash, and probably took someone all day to make. You rub it between your fingers. Clean enough. That's all that mattered. Out here, staying clean wasn't about chasing perfection. It was about keeping strong, staying respected, and not giving lice an open invitation to your scalp. The morning fog is just beginning to lift as you walk along the edge of the village, where the frost still clings to the grass like sleep to your eyelids. Behind one of the long houses, near a fenced-off corner of soil, someone is carefully scraping something onto a flat stone. It's not meat, it's not wood, it's cloth? You squint. It's laundry day, and not just any kind of laundry day, the real deal. Woolen tunics, linen underclothes, fur-trimmed cloaks, all being cleaned with the kind of earnest elbow grease that makes modern washing machines look like magic. The mainstream historical fact here is that Vikings cleaned their clothes regularly. They didn't walk around in decade-old armor smelling like swamp broth. In fact, they had words in Old Norse specifically for washing clothes, not just bodies. Fadathvat, literally garment washing, and Tvadadag, washing day, point to routines that were as weekly as your favorite Netflix drop. But here's where it gets strangely charming. Laundry wasn't a solo act. This was often a communal effort. Neighbors working side by side near rivers or wells, gossiping as they scrubbed stains out of sleeves. Think of it like the Viking version of water cooler talk, just with more scrubbing and slightly fewer paper reports. You watch as someone kneads a thick tunic against a wooden washing board. The process isn't delicate. It's not meant to be. Wool has to be treated carefully, sure, but it also needs grit, like most things in this world. And remember that homemade soap from earlier? This is where it really shines. Rub deep into fabric with a mix of water and, surprise, urine. Yes, you heard that right. Here's your fringe tidbit of the day. Stale urine, known as lant, was used as a natural ammonia source for cleaning. It helped break down grease and stains, especially in linen garments. Some households had dedicated pots for collecting it, so if you ever time travel and see a jar labeled for laundry, maybe don't open it. Scholars still debate just how widespread urine washing was, especially in colder regions where water could freeze solid for weeks. Some argue it was reserved for heavier duty cleaning, or for pre-treating cloth before dyeing. Others think it might have been the standard for every grubby tunic after a long voyage. Either way, it wasn't exactly taboo. It was chemistry with a twist of, please don't spill that. Back in the village, if someone is hanging up a row of socks on a line strung between two wooden posts, you notice how carefully the wool garments are arranged, how even the simplest tunics are smoothed out, checked for wear, stitched where needed. Clothes were expensive. You couldn't pop into a shop and grab a replacement. They were made, mended, and cherished. You pass a young girl brushing a fur cloak with stiff bristles, probably carved from antler or even hog hair. She glances up, then goes back to work, smoothing the pelt with rhythmic strokes. Behind her, a man turns his boots upside down to let them dry. His leggings are steaming slightly in the sun, freshly washed, obviously. In this world, cleanliness isn't a luxury. It's survival, comfort, and even status. A clean tunic meant you weren't too poor to take care of yourself. A mended cloak meant someone loved you enough to fix it. You start to realize that laundry, however smelly the process, was deeply tied to Viking dignity. You reach out and touch a tunic hanging on the line. It's rough but clean, smells a little like smoke, a little like lye, and maybe a little like last week's chamber pot. But it's warm, sun-dried, and well-kept. And that, in this world, says everything. The village quiets down as twilight spreads across the fjord, staining the water with streaks of gold and violet. You wander past the longhouses, their outlines soft against the haze of hearth smoke, and drift toward the shoreline, where a group of men are sitting on overturned barrels and crates, their boots kicked off, their sleeves rolled up. You think it's another storytelling session, or maybe just a moment to rest aching arms after a day of hauling nets, but no, they're trimming their nails. One holds a small blade, another uses a carved bone tool that looks suspiciously like a toothpick, and yet another is using, of all things, what looks like tweezers. Yes, tweezers. The mainstream historical fact here is surprisingly tidy. Personal grooming tools like tweezers, nail cleaners, ear picks, and even razors have been found in Viking graves across Scandinavia and the British Isles, often made of iron or bronze. These items were small, portable, and sometimes ornately decorated, little luxuries that said, I care about how I look, even if I also occasionally loot monasteries. Many of these tools were carried in grooming kits, tied to belts, in leather pouches, or suspended from brooches by chains. It's like walking around with a Viking version of a Swiss Army knife, but instead of opening wine bottles, you're plucking your eyebrow into submission. There's some scholarly debate over how widespread these grooming kits were. Were they standard for every freeman and shield maiden, or more of a fashion flex for the elite? The sheer number of finds suggests they weren't exclusive to nobility, but their craftsmanship varies. A reminder that even self-care had its class spectrum. Here comes your fringe tidbit. One archaeological site in Dublin revealed grooming tools that appeared to be imports, possibly from the Middle East or Southern Europe. That means Viking hygiene habits weren't just homespun, they were globalized. Imagine carrying tweezers that passed through a Silk Road merchant, a Byzantine ship, and a Norse longhouse, all before helping you fix your beard split ends. You sit beside one of the men, who casually hands you a small blade with a curved edge. It's a razor, crude by modern standards, but sharp. He nods toward the water basin and makes a gentle slicing motion across his jaw, then grins. Time to tidy up. So you dip the blade in the water, feeling its chill seep into your fingertips, and you start to shave with slow, careful strokes. It's not fast. It's not easy, but it works. And as your reflection trembles on the water's surface, you begin to see why this ritual mattered. Beards were status symbols, yes, but they were also personal canvases. Some men styled theirs into forks, others into elaborate braided shapes tied with metal rings, and some kept them short, neat, close to the chin. Clean-shaven faces weren't unheard of either. In fact, it's believed that some Vikings shaved their upper lips to distinguish themselves, giving them a stern, angular look. and probably some intense tan lines. Overhead, a gull cackles like it knows you've nicked your jaw a little. You wipe it with your sleeve, no big deal. Another man nearby is using a small pick to clean under his nails, then tossing the dirt into the fire like he's banishing tiny demons. You glance around. This isn't vanity. It's ritual, maintenance, even relaxation. Viking life was brutal, uncertain, filled with backaches and long voyages and the occasional flaming arrow. But in the quiet moments, when the blade's edge caught the last light of day, there was room for gentleness, for control, for care. You pass the blade back, now warm in your palm, and someone else takes their turn. No one rushes, no one jokes. It's just part of the rhythm of being human, cutting away what you no longer need. The moon rises full and heavy, casting long silver shadows across the village as a crisp wind brushes against your cheeks. You drift toward the temple grove, where candles flicker through narrow slats in a wooden shrine. The scent of herbs thickens here, sage, mugwort, something sharper you can't quite place. You're not here to worship the gods, though you nod respectfully at the carved figure of Freya nestled among birch branches. No, you're here for something more earthly, skincare. Yes, you heard that right. As you step into the circle of low stones surrounding the shrine, you spot her, a woman grinding dried calendula flowers in a stone bowl with practiced, patient hands. Her skin is weathered but glowing, the kind of glow that only comes from knowing exactly which moss to smear on a burn and how long to steep juniper berries in seal fat for the perfect winter balm. The mainstream historical fact is this: Norse people, especially women, though not exclusively, use natural ingredients for skincare. Plants like yarrow, nettle, alderbark, and birch sap were collected for their soothing or antiseptic properties. And while we don't have their exact recipes, archaeological findings and sagas hint at the widespread use of ointments and salves for everything from dry skin to battle wounds to vanity. The fringe tidbit? Birch sap. Yes, tree juice. Vikings are believed to have tapped birch trees in early spring to collect their sap, not just as a drink, but possibly as a toner or rinse. It's naturally rich in antioxidants and mildly antiseptic. Imagine wiping your face with fresh birch sap after a long, smoky day in a stuffy longhouse. No chemicals, no scented cotton pads, just nature's answer to a face wipe. There's an open scholarly debate here too. Did Vikings use makeup? Some sources, like Ibn Fadlan's famous account, describe Norsemen painting their eyes with a dark pigment, possibly charcoal or crushed minerals. Was it purely decorative, for intimidation, or even sun protection, like the way athletes today wear eye black? The academic jury is still out, but it's safe to say cosmetics weren't unknown, even among the most axe-wielding of warriors. You kneel beside the woman and watch her mix beeswax into the now powdered petals, melting it over a small flame and stirring until the mixture thickens. She dips her fingers in and dabs a bit on your cheek. It's warm, smooth, and smells like the inside of a forest in May. This wasn't a rare thing, you realize. Viking-age skincare wasn't a luxury, it was maintenance. Windburn, salt chafing, frostbite, these weren't hypothetical issues. They were daily annoyances. People had to care for their skin just to function. A cracked heel or chapped lips could mean infections. And with no antibiotics, prevention was everything. You wander over to another part of the shrine where small pots are sealed with beeswax. One contains a mix of sheep tallow and rosemary. Another, a gritty scrub made from crushed seashells and goose fat. Not glamorous, but effective. You imagine applying it slowly, one palm at a time, while the sea wind howls outside and the fire pops behind you. Someone passes you a sliver of polished bone. It's a mirror, or at least the Viking approximation of one. Your reflection is cloudy, ghost-like, but there you are. Bits of ash on your collar, a fresh cut on your chin from that rogue shaving incident, but your skin? Glowing. A little sticky maybe, but definitely nourished. Skincare wasn't just for women, either. Men had their own rituals, from beard oils to salves applied after shaving. Some even used ash and grease to protect their skin from the cold. A grimy, greasy layer of Viking SPF. As the wind picks up again, you pull your cloak tighter. Your skin feels oddly protected, as if centuries of salve makers and herb pickers are nodding in approval. The forest sighs, the gods are silent, and your face, smooth as a birch leaf in spring. The next morning dawns with a soft drizzle, the kind that makes everything glisten. Stones, rooftops, even the goats who seem unimpressed by the weather. You duck under the low awning of a longhouse and pause at the doorframe where something strange hangs. A pouch filled with herbs and what appears to be dried moss. Someone's laundry? A natural air freshener? Nope. You're looking at one of the earliest versions of a Norse deodorant. You heard me. The mainstream historical fact here is that the Vikings used aromatic herbs and minerals to mask or reduce body odor. They didn't have aluminum-based antiperspirants in sleek plastic tubes, but they did have innovation, survival instinct, and a very real desire not to smell like week-old fish stew during a marriage proposal. The most common tools in their anti-stink arsenal, dried herbs like thyme, rosemary, and juniper, tucked into clothing, rubbed on the body, or even boiled into rinse water. Sweat itself wasn't seen as shameful, but excessive odor? That was just rude. The fringe tidbit today involves volcanic rock, specifically pumice. Vikings traveling through or trading with volcanic regions like Iceland sometimes used ground pumice stone not just as a cleaning scrub, but, according to some speculative evidence, as a kind of natural odor absorber when rubbed under the arms or feet. Think of it as Viking baking soda, except sharp and a little terrifying. You're offered a small pouch tied with sinew and stuffed with dried mint and yarrow. You squeeze it gently. It smells earthy, clean, sharp in that wake up your nose kind of way. A man walks by with a similar pouch hanging from his belt, brushing against his tunic with every step. Later, when he kneels near the fire, the smoke picks up the scent and fans it across the room. Not overpowering, just a whisper of effort. It tells the room, hey, I'm cleanish. I tried. There's some scholarly debate about how much daily effort went into managing body odor. Did every Viking carry around deodorizing satchels? Or was this a once-in-a-while occasion, saved for feasts and funerals? We know they bathed regularly, especially by early medieval standards, but how they handled in-between funk remains a hazy patch in the historical record. Maybe they just embraced a little musk as part of the charm. Still, their efforts are clear in the details. Some texts mention ritual bathing before major events, weddings, duels, even long voyages. It was believed you fought better, married better, and generally lived better when you didn't reek of old herring and regret. You step outside, where rain now falls in a gentle mist. Someone nearby is rubbing their armpits with a handful of sage leaves, muttering a song you don't understand. Another scrapes their underarms with a thin piece of bone, maybe exfoliating, maybe just trying to kill time. A child rolls around laughing because he stuffed wildflowers into his boots, and now smells like a spring meadow and muddy socks. But the takeaway is clear. These people cared, not in a magazine cover, perfume advertisement kind of way, but in a practical, deeply human kind of way. They wanted to be pleasant to one another. They wanted to arrive at the feast and not clear the benches. They wanted to hold someone close without flinching. You pull your cloak tighter and tuck your own little pouch into the folds, the scent of time curling up toward your face. Clean isn't a modern idea, you realize. It's a deeply ancient one. It's a form of respect for yourself and the people around you. You take a deep breath. Yep, still better than your gym locker. The afternoon sun filters through low-hanging clouds, painting the sky in long streaks of peach and steel. You're leaning against a barrel near the market square, watching as traders unload baskets of dried fish, carved bone trinkets, and, wait, spools of thread and bolts of cloth. Looks like someone's setting up for a fashion show? Well, sort of. What you're really witnessing is the Viking world of wardrobe upkeep and the sheer amount of thought they put into how they looked. Yes, even the people famous for charging into battle with axes had opinions about fabric color and sleeve length. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Vikings loved color. Their clothes weren't just beige sacks tied with string. Archaeological finds and dye residue analysis tell us that Viking garments came in shades like deep blue, blood red, ochre, yellow, greens pulled from birch leaves, and even the rare, rich purple, though that last one was for those with serious coin. Their wool and linen were dyed with plant-based pigments, often in small batches over smoky fires, making each tunic a little piece of wearable art. Now here's your fringe tidbit. Recent finds suggest that some Viking garments may have incorporated imported silk threads, often woven into borders or embroidery to add flair and texture. Silk in Scandinavia. That's like finding caviar at a gas station. It happened, but only if you knew the right people. You meander closer to a group of women squatting by the fire, dyeing yarn in large pots that bubbled and reek faintly of vinegar and onion peels. They're chatting softly, stirring the liquid with sticks, occasionally lifting strands of wool that change color in the light, from mustard yellow to moss green, depending on how long they're boiled. You watch as one wrings out a handful of crimson yarn and drapes it across a wooden rack, steam curling up like dragon's breath. There's a scholarly debate that simmers along with those pots. How much did fashion vary across Viking society? Were bright colors reserved for the elite, or was dyeing a widespread craft practiced by anyone with access to lichen, bark, or madder root? Some argue that poor folk wore undyed or lightly tinted clothes, while others believe that even modest households took pride in a pop of color, if only to show off at the thing or a wedding. And yes, Vikings had fashion trends. Sleeve styles changed over time. Some tunics were tight-fitting and sleek, others hung long and layered. Women wore apron dresses fastened with ornate brooches, often personalized, often meaningful. You spot one now, engraved with what looks like a swan, possibly representing a family symbol or a favorite god. People didn't just wear clothes to stay warm, they wore them to say something. About status, about pride, about identity. A crisp tunic, freshly dyed and brushed out smooth, might land you a better trade deal, or at least a second glance from someone across the mead hall. Even shoes mattered. Most Viking footwear was made of soft leather, usually tanned in a lengthy, smelly process that involved, well, we won't get into that right now. Just know that owning a well-stitched pair of ankle boots was a quiet flex. Shoes were practical, yes, but also a way to show you had your life together. A man walks past you now, wearing a cloak lined with dark fur. You recognize the stitch work from a few nights ago. It was being repaired by lamplight with sinew and bone needles. Someone clearly put hours into that hem, and now, worn proudly across his shoulders, it's more than just warmth. It's history, style, and craftsmanship stitched into a single garment. You catch your reflection in a polished brass pot and realize you look pretty decent for someone who time traveled with zero prep. That cloak you picked up earlier, still holding up. And those boots, broken in just enough to look rugged, not tragic. So you stroll through the market, wind tugging at your sleeves, surrounded by color and texture and the low murmur of conversation. Turns out, Vikings didn't just dress to survive. They dressed to impress. Evening falls slowly, like a thick wool cloak settling across the land. Smoke curls upward from longhouse roofs, carrying with it the scent of pine, roasting barley, and something a little unexpected, mint. You slip inside one of the homes, blinking through the gloom as your eyes adjust to the firelit haze. Around the hearth, several people sit in a circle. And no, they're not swapping ghost stories or arguing over goat prices. They're brushing their teeth. Well, sort of. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Viking oral hygiene wasn't just a happy accident. Archaeologists have uncovered toothpicks made from bone and wood in Norse settlements, suggesting that cleaning between teeth was an actual thing. Viking skulls examined from various burial sites often show signs of decent dental care. Worn teeth, yes, but surprisingly few cavities. It makes sense. Their diet was low in sugar and high in abrasive grains, which naturally scoured the teeth during chewing. That's right. Your ancestors may have flossed with fish bones and brushed with barley bits before toothbrushes were even a dream. And now your fringe tidbit. In some regions, Vikings chewed on twigs from trees like birch and juniper to freshen their breath and clean their teeth. These chewing sticks worked like primitive toothbrushes. The ends were frayed into soft bristles, and the natural antiseptic oils helped ward off bacteria. Basically, it's Mother Nature's toothbrush, with a built-in mouthwash. There's still scholarly debate around whether Vikings used any kind of paste or powder to clean their teeth. Some speculate that ash mixed with crushed charcoal may have served a similar purpose to modern toothpaste, but no definitive recipes have survived. And while it sounds a bit grim to rub soot into your mouth, it might have worked. Charcoal is still used in some modern whitening products. You accept a twig from a boy sitting by the fire. He He offers it with a proud nod and starts chewing his own, rhythmically gnawing until the end phrase. You mimic him, chewing gently. The bark splits, releasing a bitter, piney taste that stings your tongue for a second before mellowing into something almost clean. Not minty fresh exactly, but way better than campfire breath. Nearby, an older woman carefully scrapes her teeth with a thin bone pick, then rinses her mouth with warm water. She spits into a wooden bowl, wipes her mouth, and smiles. Gap-toothed, but healthy looking. You wonder how often these little routines played out in longhouses across Scandinavia. Before sleep, after meals, maybe even before dates. Nothing ruins a romantic saga like old mead breath. You spot a pouch hanging from a beam above the fire pit. It jingles slightly as someone walks past. Inside, you later find a few extra picks, a dried mint leaf, and, curiously, a smooth pebble. Maybe it's a tongue scraper, or a lucky tooth cleaning charm. Hard to say, but someone cared enough to keep it close, like a grooming kit for their mouth. Even among warriors, dental appearance mattered. Some Viking warriors, according to fringe but tantalizing evidence, may have filed grooves into their front teeth, possibly to intimidate enemies or signify group identity. It's not universally accepted, but a few skulls have turned up with symmetrical grooves carved across the enamel. Was it decoration? A battle marker? A mistake by someone who took DIY dental care a bit too far? The jury's still out. You chew your stick a little longer, then toss it into the fire and feel oddly refreshed. The smoke lifts it up in fragrant curls, mixing with pine needles and the ghosts of fish stew. Around you, people are winding down, curling under furs and humming low songs. There's something comforting in knowing that, even 1,000 years ago, people hated morning breath just as much as you do. And honestly, if someone offered you an artisan, juniper-scented Viking chew stick in a Whole Foods aisle today, you'd probably buy it, maybe even in a 2-pack. The longhouse quiets. The fire settles into a low glow, and the night deepens into that velvety dark that only comes when the moon ducks behind the clouds. Most of the village has gone to bed, curled under thick furs or nestled into straw mats. But a few figures still move quietly near the edge of the woods, silhouetted against the last sliver of twilight. You follow, stepping lightly across the damp grass until you reach them. A group of people crouched near a stream, not for water, but to wash their clothes. Yes, even the feared Norse raiders knew how to do laundry. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Vikings took care of their clothing. They regularly washed garments, especially wool and linen, using water from rivers, rain barrels, or snowmelt. They often scrubbed with rough stones or wooden paddles, and sometimes used ash or lye soap to get things cleaner than you'd expect from a culture known more for battle cries than bubbles. Your fringe tidbit? Viking-era soap wasn't just about cleanliness. It may have doubled as a weapon of vanity. Some scholars believe Viking soap was occasionally used to bleach hair, giving it that golden glow we tend to imagine from all those over-filtered TV dramas. Ash and lye could, in strong enough concentrations, lighten darker tones, though it probably stung a bit and smelled like smoldering twigs. There's also a scholarly debate swirling around whether Vikings used urine in their laundry routine. Stick with me. Fresh urine turns into ammonia when it sits, which, chemically speaking, is a powerful cleaner and degreaser. Romans used it. Some medieval Europeans used it. Did the Norse? A few sources say yes, at least in pre-wash treatments for particularly stubborn stains. Others argue that's speculation, or limited to only certain regions or periods. Either way, it's one of those we'll never know for sure facts that makes your nose wrinkle just thinking about it. You crouch beside a young girl pounding a tunic rhythmically against a flat rock. Her hands are red from the cold water, but her movements are expert, efficient. She hums a quiet tune as she flips the fabric, dunking it in a lather of soap made from rendered animal fat and birch ash. Not exactly citrus-scented detergent, but effective. Nearby, a man is wringing out wool leggings and laying them across a line strung between 2 posts. He fluffs them carefully. No one wants scratchy trousers, and uses a bone comb to brush away lint. That's right, even their laundry had aftercare. You spot a woven basket filled with tools, wooden paddles for beating out dirt, stone weights to hold garments underwater, and a few flat-bladed knives for scraping off grime. One item, a hollowed-out horn container, likely holds something that smells sharp. Maybe lye soap, maybe fermented pine oil. You decide not to open it. The communal aspect of all this is striking. People talk while they work, sharing gossip, advice, and the occasional dirty joke. Someone tells a story about a tunic so stained from a feast that it took 3 days of scrubbing to get the honey meat out. Laughter bubbles up like the soap in the troughs. Laundry wasn't a chore to be rushed. It was part of the rhythm of life. A predictable ritual in a world full of chaos. Whether prepping for a wedding, a voyage, or just another rainy market day, clean clothes mattered. They smelled better, felt better, and showed others you had your act together. And in a culture where appearances meant survival, where status was read in stitchwork and scent, showing up clean could mean the difference between being welcomed and being watched. You take one last look at the river, its surface rippling with moonlight now, and the rows of damp clothes fluttering like pale flags in the breeze. They might have plundered a monastery last spring, but tonight they're just people trying to get that fish smell out of their socks. The air is heavy with dew now, each blade of grass glistening like it's been dipped in silver. You walk slowly back toward the center of the village, passing closed doors and dimmed hearths. Even the goats have stopped complaining. But something draws you toward a quiet corner of the settlement. Another longhouse, smaller than the others but warm, lantern lit and humming softly with a low, rhythmic sound of snipping. You ease closer and peek through the open frame. Inside, 2 women and an elderly man are huddled over a table strewn with shears, combs, bowls of scented oils, and what appears to be a mirror, a polished piece of metal, burnished to reflect just enough of a face to spot a crooked beard or a misplaced braid. Congratulations, you've just stumbled into the Viking equivalent of a barbershop. Mainstream historical fact incoming. Personal grooming was taken seriously in Norse society. Men and women both use combs, tweezers, and razors, not just for style, but for health and hygiene. Graves across Scandinavia are brimming with grooming kits, from elaborately carved bone combs to little iron scissors. Even warriors often carried a personal comb strapped to their belts. Tonight's fringe detail? Vikings sometimes dyed their hair. You read that right. In particular, some men lightened their locks using a kind of soap or lye paste, especially in areas where blonde hair was admired. The idea wasn't just clean, it was clean and striking. And while no one's found a Viking hair salon menu etched in stone, ancient Arabic writings from traders mention Norsemen with unusually pale hair, possibly enhanced for dramatic effect. There's scholarly debate over how widespread hair dyeing really was. Some argue it was rare, practiced only by a few elite or vain individuals. Others believe it was a fairly common grooming habit in areas like Iceland, where lighter features were idealized. The truth may rest somewhere in the roots, so to speak. You step into the room, and a young man with an uneven beard looks up. He's halfway through getting a trim, sitting still while the older man carefully evens out his jawline with a small hooked blade. The scent of juniper oil hangs in the air, sharp, earthy, and definitely intentional. The younger woman braids the side of her own hair in tight rows, her fingers moving like she's done it 1,000 times before. You're offered a comb, fine-toothed, worn smooth from years of use, and find yourself seated on a fur-covered bench. A mirror is held up to you, and for a moment you catch your own reflection. Wild hair, wind-chapped skin, eyes wide with 1,000 years of borrowed time. Not too bad, really. As someone dips their fingers in oil and starts massaging it gently through your hair, you feel your body relax. It's a far cry from a luxury spa, but the atmosphere is just as serene. There's pride here, skill, familiar hands trained by generations of knowing what looks and feels good. And in this sleepy Viking village, where even warriors carry combs and soap smells faintly like ambition, that ritual still lives, connected. Like somehow, across centuries, you've joined a long tradition of people who understood that looking good wasn't vanity. It was ritual. It was resilience. The longhouse quiets further. The final braid is tied off. The last lock of hair falls neatly to the floor. You rise, run a hand through your newly combed hair, and feel human. And maybe that's what surprises you most. Not the baths or the herbs or the mint twig toothbrushes, but the sheer care. The belief that how you present yourself says something deeper, that a trimmed beard could hold the same power as a polished shield. Someone nearby sharpens a razor on a smooth stone, the rhythmic scraping both soothing and hypnotic. You think about all the items you've seen in graves. combs tucked beside swords, grooming kits buried with the same care as weapons. Cleanliness wasn't an afterthought, it was an extension of dignity. The night settles deep now, the last ember curling upward like a quiet exhale. You step outside, the earth soft beneath your feet, air rich with the scent of rain-damp wood and distant ocean salt. Around you, the village is finally still. No more combs clinking, no more laughter over boiling dye pots, just the slow hush of a world ready for rest. You walk past sleeping goats, past the last smoldering fire, past tunics hung to dry in the soft breeze. The stars have returned, scattering themselves lazily across the sky, keeping gentle watch over this strange, beautiful place where soap is sacred and toothpicks come in bone. You wrap your cloak tighter. It smells faintly of rosemary now. Someone must have snuck a sprig into the hem. The memory of warm water, braided hair, and the soft scrape of pumice lingers in your mind, and you realize, drifting toward sleep, that these people, these dirty Vikings, were never so rough as they seemed. They cared for themselves, for each other, for the ritual of being clean, even in a world of mud and mead. Let your breathing slow. Let the weight of the longhouse roof above you press gently into your dreams. Sleep now, traveler. You're home.